You are watching Jeevan Kirang, and I am your host, Tayyab Rana. We are living in a digital era, and there are lots of buzzwords which are used these days, like artificial intelligence, Gen AI, cloud computing. So, we are going to explore these terms and trying to understand what this means to an ordinary person and what is its impact on them. So we are lucky that we have Patrick with us, Google domain, and he's expert of these technologies. So we are going to learn from him about these technologies and its impact on an ordinary person. Let's start with Patrick. Hi, Patrick.
Hello, how are you? Happy to be here.
I am going to ask you first. Tell us about yourself, about your journey, and how you end up in this role.
Well, I kind of got a rocky start. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but along the way, I was offered the opportunity to do some training, and I kind of enjoyed the training I did. I've also always kind of loved technology and new technologies, and that sort of got me into the IT development world. And for a lot of years, I taught organizations and people to develop systems, write code. That sort of got me into working in the cloud. As you said, primarily I work in the Google Cloud space and training people in Google Cloud. And of course, Google is one of the big movers in a lot of the AI and generative AI changes that we are seeing in the world today. And so Google actually asked me to do some early coursework and help them develop some classes on generative AI. And that sort of dragged me over into the generative AI world. So I really enjoy the training. I enjoy technologies. I enjoy learning new things. And so it's been a lot of fun. It's something that I enjoy and I enjoy working with, for sure.
Excellent. So, what motivates you to adopt this career?
Well, it's just something, I think my dad always said, if you can find a job that you enjoy, then maybe it's only 90% boring. And, at least if you enjoy it, it's something that makes, it's better than having a job you hate. And I definitely enjoy the training aspect. I'm not sure if I was an actor in another life or something, but I enjoy the training. I enjoy being in front of a group of people, enjoy seeing them learn, enjoy, the feedback I get from them. So it really, the act of training and also the area where I work, high tech, it's an area where, a lot of the people who know high tech, they aren't the kind of people that you want teaching you a class. They may be very good technologically speaking, but they may be not as interesting teaching a class. So it's something where I kind of have a little niche where I can try to keep people entertained while I'm teaching them something very technical. And so that's a nice niche job that I have, and I enjoy it, definitely.
Okay, pretty good. Patrick, these are the terms we are most often here and there, like Gen AI, artificial intelligence, cloud computing. Without going into technical details, what does these means and how these technologies are impacting an ordinary person?
Well, I guess the first shift has been the shift towards cloud. When I got my first job in IT as a developer, before I was training or anything else, back in those days, all the computers would be in the building with you. You would have a server room, and I could get up from my desk and I could go into the server room where they would have all these computers that they were running websites, they were running, systems in the company. And you as an organization would have to manage those. The shift towards cloud started in the early 2000s. At this point, I think the number is about 60%. About 60% of all the computers in the world now are in the cloud. And when you go to the cloud, the difference is instead of you owning the servers and they're in the room next door to you, you go to these big cloud providers and they are basically renting you computers. They are renting you servers. It's very much a utility model. You typically don't generate your own power. You tap into the power grid and you pay for what you use. The cloud is a very similar utility model, but it's more for computing services. You tap into the cloud, they own the buildings, they own the servers, and what you're doing is you're renting these servers, you're renting computers to do business tasks, to run your website, to handle your payroll, to store your customer data. And that way you don't have to worry about building that room or that building, where the servers live. So the first shift that's happened is, the majority of organizations in the world have at least some of their compute services in some cloud provider. AWS, Amazon, Microsoft, Google Cloud are the big three. They represent the majority of your cloud services. So companies are getting out of the business of managing their own servers. I remember working for McDonald's one time, and McDonald's had this big, massive server building where they were running all these servers to keep up with McDonald's. If you think about McDonald's, their core business is not servers. Their core business is hamburgers and food and restaurants. So organizations like that, they're letting someone like Google, who's really good at taking care of the servers, take care of them. So that was kind of the first trend that we're still seeing. Most organizations are moving towards putting their stuff in the cloud. Artificial intelligence is sort of a concept that says, how can I have a computer that does something that normally a human would do, right? AI theory has been evolving since just after World War II. So, people have been talking a long time about, how can I teach a computer to do something? You pick up your phone and you go to take a picture and it puts a green box around people's faces. Well, that's some sort of artificial intelligence that has learned to recognize people's faces, And so artificial intelligence has been kind of gradually growing it. You see it in cars. You see it in, you see it in all kinds of phone systems and all kinds of things. A few years ago, though, we've seen this major shift towards generative AI. And in generative AI, the major difference is they've built AIs that can talk to you, right? They're not actually smart. They're not actually creative. They're not actually insightful, but they can talk to you. So what's happened is we've built these systems, Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, and these systems are systems that we can have a conversation with. And we've never really had computers that you could have a conversation with quite like this. So now suddenly you hear everybody talking about, my 81-year-old mother is talking to me about, ChatGPT and what can it do for her kind of thing. So I think that the change that has occurred is it's a technology that anybody can use. And it's not only a technology that anybody can use, it's a technology that more and more of us are going to be expected to use. Because, like me personally, I have certain tasks I have to accomplish in my job. If I use generative AI, I'm more productive. I can get those tasks done faster, which makes my boss happy. And so I think in the work world, depending on the profession you're in, you're seeing more and more where you are going to be expected to use generative AI because it can help you work faster. I think if you're not using it for work, I don't just use it for work. The other night I needed to make spaghetti and I was missing one of my key ingredients. So I went to the AI and I said, these are the ingredients I have. Can I make spaghetti sauce with this? And it came up with a recipe and it gave me a recipe that was really good. So that's something, it kind of is the next step beyond Google. For a long time, you have a family meal and a discussion comes up over some fact. And 5 different phones come out and people Google what the answer is to that question. More and more, it's not that you're going to Google the answer. You're going to go to one of these generative AI systems and you're going to ask your question like you would to another person. And it's going to give you an answer like you're getting that answer from another person. They may not be truly creative. They may not be truly insightful, but they have instant access to just unimaginable information. So they're very good at finding you information that you can work with. And if you can talk, then you can talk to an AI.
Interesting. So if we look in the future, what do you think where we will be 3 years or 5 years from now in artificial intelligence or Gen AI point of view?
Well, okay, so I have several answers to this. My first answer will be, it is very much an evolve or die kind of technology. I think those of us, depending on your career, all of us to a certain degree are going to be expected to use generative AI to improve our performance, right? And so I think part of your answer is 3 to 5 years from now, most people in a lot of different jobs are going to be using generative AI daily, all day long while they're doing their job. So I think that's one big shift you're going to see. Right now, I had lunch with my brother over the weekend. He was passing through on a trip, and he was talking about how frustrated he was at his employees who are not using generative AI. And he really wants to figure out, well, how can we get them using more generative AI? So I think 3 to 5 years from now, I think a lot of us, even the ones who are resistant, are going to be at least figuring out where generative AI can fit. Another comment I would make, though, is I was just on a call with a client talking about a course. And my client says to me, during the class, please tell us where generative AI will be 5 years from now. And I just laughed at him because honestly, it has evolved so much in the last 12 months. It has evolved so much in the last 24 months that it's sort of difficult for me to imagine where it's going to be 5 years from now. The generative AI systems are evolving very rapidly. I expect that we're going to have, one of the common terms you hear is agents, and the word agent comes from, well, you imagine calling a company and you have a question on your bill and they transfer you to the billing agent. The word agent is kind of conceptually the similar, where an agent handles a certain task. I suspect we're going to have more and more agents all over the place in our daily lives. I suspect we're going to have agents that are going to be watching us while we're working on a computer, making suggestions as we go. Right now, I have to kind of be proactive, or I have to, I don't know, is it reactive? I have to run into a problem. I have to turn to my agent. I have to ask it a question. It gives me a suggestion and I move on, right? So I have to take the step where I ask the agent. I figure we're not far from where an agent is just going to be watching you. And as something happens, the agent over here, maybe it's on your other monitor and it says something to you, oh, well, I think you should try this, without you having to ask the question. So I think the agents are going to be more proactive. I think agents are going to be everywhere, from your car to your phone to your computers to your smart home. So it's difficult to imagine, though, what else the agents are going to be doing because the technology is so new. ChatGPT came out November 30th of 2022. So ChatGPT is not quite 4 years old yet. And that's really the first generative AI common public system that people saw. So generative AI by most measures is only 3 or 4 years old. So when you say things like, where's it going to be 5 years from now? You have to understand that's more than double the life that it's been around. So I suspect we're going to see a lot of innovation that has come. But there's also going to be some pain that comes along with that. Anthropic just released a labor market study of jobs that are going to be most impacted by generative AI. And so it was very interesting to see the jobs that are going to be impacted. And so again, 5 years from now, you're probably going to see a changing landscape at work because, some jobs you're not going to need as many people. Other jobs are going to be around that didn't used to exist at all because of generative AI. So it's going to be fairly broad changes, I think, that are going to be traced back to generative AI. And again, in our daily lives, I think it's going to be way more acceptable for the typical person to do like what I said. I need a recipe for this. I have a question on this, and I think more and more people are going to be used to their AI companion that kind of helps them out.
Interesting. So in the IT world, a few years ago, the development was a desktop application, and then there was a paradigm shift, web development.
Mm-hmm.
Is it saying correct that now there is another paradigm shift in the IT environment, that we are not going to develop application in the traditional way? Now it is all based on generative AI or Gen AI. Is this statement correct?
I don't know that I would go quite that far. I keep seeing articles that say that. I've been writing code since 1980. I got paid to write my first line of code in about 1993. So I've been writing code for a long time, And what I would say is probably more true. I don't think developers are going to be gone because generative AI can do it. I think the problem with generative AI is you tend to get yourself in trouble when you just kind of rubber stamp everything that comes out of it. One of the stories I tell is I was recently at a bookstore. This is true. I was recently at a big bookstore with a coffee shop, and I looked across from the bookstore to the coffee shop, and there was a young guy, college age. And as I watched, he was looking at a generative chatbot, and I see him change his screen, and now he's looking at a code editor, and I see him paste in some code. And so as I watched, I would check on him every now and then, and he was kind of going back and forth. He would go to the generative AI, he would ask it a question, it would give him code, he'd come back, he'd paste the code, and he was kind of going back and forth. And after about 10 minutes, he slams the laptop shut and he storms out of the restaurant. And of course, I was kind of chuckling to myself, did generative AI not do your homework for you? The problem in a lot of fields is, since generative AI is not creative the way a human is, since it is not insightful the way a human is, the thinker in the picture, the decision maker, the team lead, the boss needs to be you. The generative AI is your worker companion. It can handle very specific tasks if you clearly define them and give it to it, right? But when you get a very broad task, I need you to build an application that does X, Y, Z, it's honestly not so good at doing that, right? If you have an experienced software engineer that's sort of guiding the process, it's very good at that. And you can absolutely get applications built faster. But I think it's probably narrow-minded to think that I can just take a business problem and hand it to generative AI and it's going to knock out an entire application for me. It's not really there yet, And honestly, I'm not sure that it'll ever get there. But it can definitely aid your developers. So I think the shift, if you look at the biggest fields that are impacted by generative AI, according to that labor market study I told you that just came out 10 days ago from Anthropic, the biggest jobs that are going to be impacted, according to them, is managers and developers, right? People like me who are the developers, we and some managers are going to be some of the biggest, most impacted, segments of the society, because there's so much that we do in our daily jobs that generative AI can do, or at least help us do. So, I think you're absolutely right that it is a paradigm shift. I'm not sure it's going to be that developers are gone because generative AI is going to do everything. I suspect what's going to happen is you're going to need fewer developers, because generative AI is going to take your existing developers and make them much more productive. I can get code done way faster than I used to be able to. But if I give up creative control, the code is not very good. The code is difficult to maintain. If I maintain creative control and I have the vision, and generative AI is my companion that's taking care of what I think of as kind of the grunt work, the low-level detail work. It's very good at that low-level detail work. I'm very good at the big picture planning work. And again, we make a really good team because of that. So I think the paradigm shift is going to be, where do you fit into this new world? Okay. If you don't need as many data analysts as you used to, if you don't need as many developers as you used to, if you don't need as many managers as you used to, right? Where do you shift? And where do you go? And what kind of jobs, that's going to be kind of the next thing, is what kind of jobs are going to come up that didn't even used to exist because of generative AI. So I absolutely think it's a paradigm shift. And just like when you mentioned the internet, there were companies who did not want to have web pages, and a lot of them are gone now, because they did not embrace the technology and they got left on the pages of history. I definitely think the same is going to be true today, right? There's going to be organizations, there's going to be people who get left behind because they don't embrace this wave of change. But we have to kind of find a way to sort of, how do we fit in this wave of change? How can we take advantage of it and not get left behind? So yeah, it's absolutely a huge paradigm shift, but exactly what that looks like, it's too early to tell. 5 years from now, we're going to know. 5 years from now, there's going to be jobs that are partially gone because of generative AI. 5 years from now, there's going to be roles that you don't, where you have to use it or you can't fit in that role, But 5 years from now, there's also going to be jobs that never used to exist because of generative AI. Yeah.
Well, these days, the fresh graduate, if they want to adopt this career, what they should do and which job will be more demanding and they will be more employable in this environment?
Well, I would say whatever job you want to go into, you should be thinking about how generative AI can make you more productive, right? So I think, first off, the statistics say that something upwards of 95% of new college grads, they are already using generative AI in their daily lives. They've learned how to use generative AI at university to do their career, to do their degree, right? So one nice thing about these new employees is they probably already have good generative AI skills. So that's good, As far as what career to go in, I don't know that I necessarily would recommend different careers. I think we're going to still need data analysts. We still need developers. We still need managers. But again, you need to be someone who's going to come in knowing how to do your job with the help of generative AI. If I were hiring a brand new developer today, I would want a developer who already understands how to use generative AI to make them a more productive developer, right? So I think strong personal generative AI skills to help you do whatever your job is. I think that's something that, whatever job you want to go into, I think that's something that's going to be a must. And certainly developers, data analysts, there's a lot of careers that are currently very big careers that are still going to be big careers, but you're going to need that generative AI. Yeah.
So on a lighter note, we will come back on this discussion. I like your mustache. People these days does not have the mustache. I also have. But how do you manage this? And who motivates you to have these?
I just thought it was fun. In a certain degree, to a certain level in my job, I'm kind of a performer. So I grew up in Texas, so I have the cowboy hat, So when I go to a conference or when I go somewhere, I have a cowboy hat on and I have boots. And, somewhere along the way, I shaved the beard off, but I had a beard and I grew this big mustache and I've kind of kept it. It's sort of if nothing else, it's a talking point. But it's fun. I just thought it was sort of entertaining to, it's something that you don't see as much today as you used to. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
It's funny, it's funny when I do training for India or Pakistan, it's funny. Some of the countries where you do run into people that do have fairly impressive mustaches, it's sort of interesting. But anyway, I enjoy it. It's fun.
Is it easy to manage or it's hard?
It's not bad. It took some trial and error to figure it out. But, basically it's a form of wax. In the old days, they used wax that was like wax. These days, though, they have wax that's water soluble. So, I can wash this out and it doesn't bother me, But it's just a type of wax that sort of goes on like a paste, but then it hardens. And so then I can get something like this that kind of stays where it's supposed to be.
So where you grew up and where you went to school?
I grew up in Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
I got married young. But the first time I went to college, I didn't do so well. So I kind of asked to leave the university because my grades were so bad. Then I did I got married and I went into the U.S. military and I spent 4 years in the Marines. And when I got out of the Marines, I was actually working as an auto mechanic. And I thought to myself, well, I might want to do something more than be a auto mechanic. So maybe I should go back to school. And I went back to school and discovered I was pretty good at math. My advisor asked me one day, do you want to teach high school math? I said, no. He says, well, maybe you should be an actuary. And I read up and I thought that sounded like a pretty good career. So my wife and I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and I went to a university named Georgia State University. They have one of the best actuarial programs in the country. actuaries, if you don't know, they work for insurance companies and they are basically statisticians.
Yeah.
So we moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and I went to this university, and my wife was also going to the same university. And it was while I was there that I got a part-time job working in a development company where I started writing code for a company. And actually, I was also tutoring math. And it was one of my organizations I tutored math for that asked me if I would be interested in teaching a class. And I said, sure. So I started doing training that was like certification prep, is kind of that kind of training. But I discovered I kind of liked the training part. And I also, though I liked the math in the actuarial science program, I actually liked the software development better. So when I left school, at that point, I really liked training and I really liked writing code. So my first training job, which was maybe 1996, my first training job was teaching software, teaching Java coding, teaching Perl coding, teaching C# and JavaScript. So I kind of got my start in training working for an organization where they would send me different places and I would teach classes on software development. And that I never really look back. What I do now, I still write classes, I still teach classes. The subject matter has changed, but it's very much in the IT world. Yeah. So I really enjoyed it, and the actuarial science was good foundation. There's a lot of math and software development, but yeah. Even though I took some of the exams, I never worked as an actuary because I got into the software and the teaching.
In your lifetime, any interesting event which you remember and very, very exciting and you like to share?
I don't know. I mean, there's always exciting events, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know anything particular, but it's definitely been very interesting. I think doing the wide variety of jobs. Everything from being in the military to being a auto mechanic to being a trainer who teaches very advanced technology. I think those are all. It's been a very interesting career, and it's interesting to see kind of how technology has impacted the world and continues to do so. And I enjoy it. I enjoy learning new things and staying up on new technologies. And in a certain degree, I'm kind of paid to do it because my training is always something new and something interesting. But yeah, so I'm not sure that's a good answer on that, but so many things to pick just one or two.
So let's come back on a technology. Here is a scenario. You are 23 or 24 years old. You just came out from the college and your degree is not computer engineering or computer related. And you want to get into artificial intelligence or in this field. What will you do and what resources you are going to use to make ready in this career?
Well, I think there's a couple of questions to ask. First off, are you looking to shift careers, or do you like your career? You just want to embrace generative AI or technology, right? There's a lot of need for everything from managers to, schedulers to, there's a lot of jobs where you can stay doing what you enjoy doing. And, you can stay doing what you want to do, but how can you be more productive with generative AI? So one thing is, if you like your job, if you like your career, okay, how can I start using generative AI to make, my job, my career better? How can I be better at this? How can I get the promotion because I'm the one who is more productive because I can use generative AI? So I think one question back to the person would be, do you already have a plan? You want to be a data analyst, or you want to be a manager, or you want to be in marketing, and can generative AI allow me to be in that career, but be more appealing, more hireable, more promotable because generative AI helps me, so that's one answer. Another answer, of course, is even though there's a lot of predictions on how generative AI is going to impact the labor market, none of that has really come to pass yet. There's no evidence that any job right now has been really impacted by generative AI in a meaningful way. So what that means is historically high-paying jobs things like computer science, things like certain management jobs, that there's still a lot of that there's still high paying jobs. But again, they're going to be high paying jobs that involve generative AI. So if you're looking for a career shift, what field do you want to shift into? Do you want to shift into a more technical field, or are you looking at marketing? Are you looking at, so go look at some of the job reports on, the highest paying jobs with your background or with a certification or with a degree, and which of those are most interesting to you. As far as getting up on the technology, you can start very basic. Stop using Google. Stop going to Google search to find things. Pull up your generative AI companion, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude. And anytime you have a question, go to generative AI and ask the question there. Get used to using generative AI if you're not already doing it, right? Use it every day. Get better at asking questions. Get better at having a conversation until you get the answer that you need, right? And then, of course, you do have a lot of organizations like Udemy. You have a lot of that offer classes on generative AI. You have a lot of certifications in the Google world, in the Microsoft world, et cetera, on, how can you be a leader with generative AI? How can you talk intelligently about AI and generative AI technologies? So cloud is also big. We're talking very much about AI, generative AI, but some of the highest paying certification jobs these days are cloud-based. You are an architect in Google. You are an architect in AWS or Azure. So if you do want something more technical, look at some of the certifications that are out there that are maybe cloud oriented, because there's tons and tons and tons of cloud jobs that are not centrally generative AI, but they're good cloud jobs out there. But again, those are on the more technical side. So I think if you're looking for something that's not as technical, marketing, let's say, generative AI would be fantastic at helping you with marketing, but you have to figure out how that works, right? And you have to figure out how to get help from that. So I would say, what interests you? I would want to follow my interests, but I would also ask, if I follow this interest, is this something that generative AI can help me do? Or how is generative AI going to impact this particular job? So I would definitely ask that.
But if we compare the certification and hands-on experience, which one is better for the employment point of view?
Both. I don't know better. Let's put it this way. In a lot of jobs, there are hurdles you have to get over, right? I am less and less a believer in college, for example. I think college, in some respects, wastes a lot of your time. But at the same time, there's a lot of jobs, if you can't check that box that says you have a college degree, you can't even get into consideration, right? So I think when it comes to things like degrees and it comes to things like certification looks good on a resume, right? Just like a college degree looks good on a resume. But obviously, hands-on experience is what's really going to help you do that job, And so I think the answer is you want to know how to do the job, which is going to require hands-on experience. But sometimes if once you get the hands-on experience, there's a certification that you can get. That's the kind of thing that looks good on a resume. When you're going to apply for a job, you can say, well, not only do I have this hands-on experience, but here's a certification that says that I do, kind of thing, right? So certification, I don't do well on certification. I don't test well. So in that respect, I've always disliked it. But on the other hand, I understand it looks good on my resume. So there are certifications that I have held in my life that I strictly got because I wanted to set myself apart from the crowd, right? If me and some other person has about the same amount of experience, but I have these certifications that other person doesn't, that's something that can help me. So I would say, I think the hands-on experience is probably most important because it's practical. It shows you know how to do the job. But everybody is going to say we have this many years of hands-on experience, right? So having it is good, but having the certifications that kind of help set you apart, that's having both is better.
Anything you want to say at the end?
Well, I would not buy into some of the hype out there that says generative AI is going to be the end of a lot of jobs. I think there's jobs that are definitely going to be impacted. but I don't think it's, there's so many technologies that have come along that people say are going to, like ruin the workforce. It's not going to ruin the workforce, but it is going to change the shape of the workforce. The landscape of the workforce is going to change. So as I said before, find a career that is of interest to you, find a job that you like, so it's not just all tedium, and find a way that you can use generative AI to make yourself more hireable, more promotable, right? And don't be shy about saying it. Don't be shy about saying, yes, I embrace generative AI in my workflow. I understand how it works. If you hire me, you not only get my experience, like you said, hands-on experience where I really know how to do this stuff, but I also know how to leverage generative AI to help me be more productive. That's something I think that employers are going to be looking for going into the future.
Well, see how knowledgeable Patrick is, and and it's a pleasure talking to him. And our time is almost going to end. And thank you very much, Patrick. And it's a pleasure talking again. And thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on, and best of luck to you and all your viewers.
I have added links in the description for more information. Thank you.